The perfect suburban Saturday morning has a specific sound. It's a gentle symphony of distant lawnmowers, the cheerful chirping of birds that haven't yet been displaced by pesticide-drenched lawns, and the soft whoosh of an automated sprinkler system. It's the sound of peace, of equity, of a 30-year mortgage well invested. I was standing on my own personal patch of that peace, a mug of coffee warming my hands, the sun warming my face. Before me stood my monument to potential, my fortress of weekend ambition, a brand-new, battleship-gray resin shed. Inside that shed was everything I needed to begin construction on my life's work, my magnum opus, a backyard culinary temple I had christened the Meatropolis. But something was wrong. There, on the heavy-duty steel hasp I had so proudly installed, hung a padlock. This wasn't one of your piddly master locks from the hardware store checkout line. This thing was a beast, a matte black chunk of malevolence with a keyhole that looked like a cryptic symbol from a secret society. It screamed, "No!" And taped to the shed door, fluttering slightly in the breeze, was the opening salvo of the war I didn't know I was fighting. It was a laminated sheet of paper, the text printed in an infuriatingly jaunty Comic Sans font. Notice of access denial. Per HOA bylaw 7.4a, unapproved project materials. This storage unit has been temporarily secured by the Architectural Review Committee, pending an official materials audit. Please submit a Form 881C to schedule a compliance review hearing. Have a wonderful weekend. Carol, HOA President. I read it twice. Then a third time, just to make sure I hadn't had a minor stroke. The steam from my coffee mug felt like the fumes of my own boiling rage. Temporarily secured. That was a new one. In my old neighborhood, we called that padlocking someone's stuff without asking, and it was generally followed by a heated exchange of words, not found in any HOA bylaw. My wife, Sarah, came out onto the patio, holding her own mug. "You've been staring at that shed for 5 minutes. Did you forget how to open a door?" I just pointed. She walked closer, read the note, and let out a low groan. "Oh no, she didn't." "She did," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "She declared war on a Saturday." To understand the sheer, unmitigated gall of this act, you need to understand the last 3 months of my life. Sarah and I had fled the city for this, for the meadows at Whispering Pines. The name alone should have been a red flag, sounding less like a neighborhood and more like a retirement home for melancholic poets. But we saw the wide, clean streets, the identical but inoffensive houses, the families pushing strollers, and we drank the Kool-Aid. "Think of the quiet," Sarah had said. "Think of the space," I had dreamed. "I can finally build it." It was the Meatropolis. For years I had sketched it on napkins, designed it in free 3D software, and bored friends with its details at parties. It wasn't just a BQ pit. It was a statement. A brick and stone altar to the gods of smoke and fire, featuring a competition-grade offset smoker, a 6-burner gas grill for weeknight efficiency, and the crown jewel, a wood-fired pizza oven. My friends thought I was insane. Sarah thought it was endearing. I knew it was my destiny. Our first taste of the regime came a week after we moved in. We received a thin beige envelope in the mail, no stamp, hand-delivered. Inside was a letter informing us of a $25 fine for violation 11.3b, improper post-collection receptacle visibility. We had left our trash and recycling bins at the curb until 7:05 p.m. on trash day. The grace period, apparently, ended at 7 p.m. sharp. Stapled to the violation was a grainy, zoomed-in photograph of our bins, time-stamped, taken from across the street like we were persons of interest in a federal investigation. "Is this a joke?" I had asked, holding the photo. I don't think Carol jokes, Sarah had said, already looking worried. Carol was the HOA president. We'd met her once. She was a woman in her 60s, with a helmet of perfectly coiffed silver hair, a gaze that could curdle milk, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She lived 3 houses down in a home whose lawn was a terrifying, unnaturally vibrant shade of green. It didn't look like grass. It looked like a CGI rendering of grass. Being a good, law-abiding citizen who just wanted to build his brisket palace in peace, I decided to go through the proper channels. I spent 40 hours perfecting my proposal for the meat-ropolis. I'm not exaggerating. 40 hours. I included architectural drawings, a complete materials list with product codes, and a goddamn topographical map of my backyard showing smoke drift patterns based on prevailing wind data I got from the National Weather Service. It was more detailed than the paperwork for our mortgage. I submitted it to the Architectural Review Committee, which, I soon learned, consisted of Carol and 2 terrified-looking sycophants named Marge and Gerald. A week later, I was summoned. The HOA monthly meeting was held in Carol's garage. The space was so clean you could have performed surgery in it. The walls were lined with neatly labeled plastic bins and framed certificates from a Neighborhood of the Year contest that I'm 99% sure Carol invented. The air smelled of Windex and quiet desperation. I sat on a folding chair while Carol stood at a podium, my beautiful, laminated proposal in her hand. David, she began, the name rolling off her tongue like it was something she'd scraped off her shoe. We have reviewed your submission for the, meat-ropolis. She said the name as if it were a communicable disease. While the committee and I appreciate the ambition of your project, she continued, peering at me over her reading glasses, we have some concerns. I braced myself. First, the brick. You've specified autumn russet. Our approved masonry palette, as you'll find on page 47 of the Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, clearly lists Sante Fe clay or Mission taupe as the only acceptable choices. I blinked. Carol? They're all reddish-brown bricks. I looked at the samples. You can barely tell the difference from 10 feet away. A collective gasp went through the garage. Marge clutched her pearls. Gerald looked like he was about to faint. The bylaws are the difference, David, Carol said, her voice dropping to a glacial chill. The bylaws. It went on. The chimney I'd designed was 6 inches taller than the maximum allowable height for a secondary structure. The stone veneer I'd chosen for the base didn't harmonize with the builder-grade vinyl siding on my house. She raised a concern about excessive smoke drift and its potential effect on Marge's prize-winning petunias 2 yards over. The project was officially tabled for further review, which I knew was HOA speak for dead on arrival. I walked home in a daze, clutching my rejected masterpiece. The American dream, it turned out, was subject to architectural approval. Defeated, I did what any modern man does when faced with an insurmountable problem. I complained about it on the internet. I found a local community forum and posted a heavily redacted version of my story. Within an hour, I had a private message. Sounds like a Carol problem, call me. Gus. The next day, a dusty, rust-pocked Ford F-150 that looked like it had survived a war rumbled up to my curb. Out stepped Gus. He was a man made of leather and gristle, with a magnificent gray mustache and hands that looked like they could crush rocks. His company's tagline, emblazoned on the side of his truck, was simple. Gus's Construction. I build things. No BS. I showed him Carol's rejection letter. He read it, a low rumble starting in his chest that grew into a full-blown, gravelly laugh. He spat a stream of tobacco juice onto a patch of weeds on the edge of my lawn with surgical precision. Classic Carol, he grunted, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. She once tried to fine me because my truck was leaking unapproved automotive fluids on the asphalt. It was rainwater from a storm the night before. I sent her a bill for my time. Gus, it turned out, was a seasoned veteran of the HOA wars. He was my Gandalf, my Obi-Wan Kenobi. "See, your mistake, kid, is you're fighting fair," he said, leaning against his truck. "You're trying to reason with an unreasonable person. An HOA president ain't a person. It's a title. And Carol's title is fueled by spite and boredom. You can't fight the rules. You gotta use their own stupid words against them." And so, under Gus's tutelage, we drafted a new plan. A masterpiece of malicious compliance. We weren't building a BBQ pit. Oh no. We were submitting a plan for a Phase 1 landscape feature foundation pad. It was, for all intents and purposes, a 10 by 15-foot concrete slab. Nothing more. No bricks, no chimney, no mention of meat. It was 100% compliant with every bylaw in the book. There was no mention of a required color for concrete. 2 weeks later, a beige envelope appeared on my doorstep. It was an approval letter. I had never felt such a profound sense of victory. Now, the plan kicked into high gear. I wasn't just building a foundation. I was building my arsenal. I ordered 2 pallets of the most beautiful autumn russet brick I could find. I ordered a commercial-grade, trailer-hitch-equipped smoker that looked like a small locomotive. I ordered the 6-burner grill, bags of mortar, rebar, a cement mixer, and enough tools to outfit a small construction company. One by one, the delivery trucks came. And with military precision, I ferried every last item into my new battleship gray shed. The shed bulged slightly, its doors straining against the bounty within. It was my Trojan horse, sitting in plain sight on the battlefield of my backyard. I had won. The evening before the concrete pour was scheduled, I was out in the yard, admiring my handiwork. A quiet hum made me look up. It was Carol, doing a slow, menacing drive-by in her electric golf cart, the kind used for navigating pristine fairways, not suburban streets. She slowed as she passed my house. Her eyes, narrowed into slits, locked onto my shed. She didn't stop. She didn't wave. She just gave me a look. It was a look that said, "I know what you're doing, and there will be consequences." Which brought me back to this morning. Standing in my perfect yard, staring at the laminated note and the industrial-grade lock. My contractor, Gus, was due in an hour. The concrete truck, a non-refundable, rolling hourglass, was probably already on its way. All my tools, all my materials, thousands of dollars of my dream were being held hostage in my own backyard. The symphony of the suburbs had stopped. All I could hear was the drumbeat of war. My first instinct was to be a reasonable adult. That was my first mistake. "I'm just going to call her," I told Sarah, trying to keep my voice steady. "This has to be a misunderstanding." Sarah gave me a look that said, "Oh, you sweet summer child." I pulled out my phone and dialed the main HOA number listed on the website. It rang once, then went to a pre-recorded message in Carol's cheerful, yet soulless voice, before informing me that the mailbox was full and could not accept new messages. Of course it was full. It was probably overflowing with the unheard pleas of other suburban souls she was tormenting. Plan B. The website also listed an emergency hotline. I dialed it. Carol's cell phone went straight to voicemail. I didn't even bother leaving a message. What was I going to say? "Hi, Carol. It's Dave. You've illegally commandeered my property and are about to cost me $1,000 in concrete fees. Call me back. XOXO." "Okay, new plan," I announced, marching toward the front door. "I'm going over there." "Dave, don't," Sarah warned. "She wants this. She wants a confrontation." "She's got one," I muttered, pulling on my shoes. Her house was a beige fortress of conformity. The lawn was perfect. The flower beds were perfect. Not a single leaf dared to be out of place. I strode up the perfectly paved walkway and pressed the button on her Ring doorbell. A long moment passed. Then a crackle. "Can I help you, David?" Her voice, tinny and distorted through the tiny speaker, dripped with smug satisfaction. She was watching me. "Carol, it's Dave," I said, trying to sound more composed than I felt. "You've put a lock on my shed. I have a contractor and a truck full of concrete arriving any minute. You need to come over and unlock it. Now?" There was another pause. I could practically hear her savoring the moment. As the notice clearly states, all HOA actions are documented and follow established procedure, she chirped. If you wish to contest the action, you need to submit Form 881C. I'm in the middle of preparing my gluten-free scones for the bake sale and simply cannot be disturbed. "Carol, this is insane. You can't just—" The speaker clicked off. The little blue light on the doorbell went dark. I was left staring at my own enraged, distorted reflection in her perfectly polished brass door knocker. I walked back to my house, my fists clenched. The first rumble of a heavy engine echoed from the end of the street. It was the concrete truck, arriving like a gray harbinger of financial doom. Desperate, I Googled 24-hour locksmith. A van promising fast, affordable service was at my house in 20 minutes. A young kid with more metal in his face than a hardware store aisle hopped out. He was chewing gum and looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He took one look at the lock, then at the laminated note I hadn't bothered to take down. He let out a low whistle. "Whoa, dude." He poked the lock with a tension wrench. "That's an Abloy Protec 2, military grade. They use these on shipping containers and stuff. You'd have an easier time chewing through the door." He then tapped the laminated note. "And that's an HOA notice." He backed away, holding his hands up as if the shed were radioactive. "No way, man. No way I'm touching that. My boss has one rule. We don't get involved in domestic disputes or HOA disputes. He says trying to solve an HOA problem is like trying to nail Jell-O to a tree. It's messy, and you just end up looking stupid." He gave me an apologetic shrug. "Sorry, dude. That'll be a $75 service call fee." I paid him, my spirit sinking with every dollar. Just then, Gus's old Ford rumbled up to the curb. He got out, took a swig from a thermos, and ambled into the backyard. He saw the lock. He saw my face. He saw the concrete truck idling at the end of the block. He just shook his head. "She got you," he said, not unkindly. "She cornered you. That concrete is going to start setting in the drum if we don't get it poured in the next hour. The driver's going to have to dump it, and he's going to charge you a dump fee that'll make your eyes water." This was it. The moment of defeat. I stood there, paralyzed. My project, my money, my entire weekend, all held captive by a 60-something-year-old woman and a Finnish lock. I looked at the concrete truck. I looked at Gus's sympathetic, weathered face. I looked at my shed, my Trojan horse that had been so cleverly turned into my own prison. And then an idea began to form. It was a terrible idea. A glorious idea. An idea born of pure, unadulterated American desperation. An idea that could only be brought to life by a phone call. I pulled out my phone, my fingers flying across the screen. I scrolled to a contact I hadn't called on a Saturday morning in a long time. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "Tom's House of Pain, you stab 'em, we slab 'em," a cheerful voice answered. "Tom, it's Dave," I said, my voice low and urgent. "I have a situation, and I think you're the only man who can solve it." Tom, my best friend since college, was a city firefighter. He was a man who ran into burning buildings for a living and thought a relaxing afternoon was seeing how many hot dogs he could eat in 10 minutes. "Let me guess," he said, the sound of a TV in the background. "You tried to deep fry a frozen turkey again, didn't you? I told you, man, you gotta thaw it first." "Worse," I said. "Much worse. I'm in an HOA war, Tom. The enemy has taken my shed." I gave him the entire story, from the beige envelopes to the gluten-free scones to the military-grade lock. I laid it on thick, painting Carol as a suburban despot, a petty tyrant ruling her beige kingdom with an iron fist. There was a long, silent pause on the other end of the line. I held my breath. Then I heard it. A low, deep chuckle that started in his chest and erupted into a full-throated, joyous belly laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had just been handed the greatest gift in the world. "Davy, my boy," he said, trying to catch his breath. "Oh, this is beautiful. This is the most beautiful story I've ever heard. Are you asking me what I think you're asking me?" "It's a high-security lock, Tom," I said, playing my final card. "A patriot's duty is to fight tyranny wherever it may fester, even in the suburbs." "Say no more," he said, his voice now all business. "This is the call I've been training for. My whole life has been leading to this moment. I'm on a 24-hour shift, but I'm due for my dinner break in about now." I could hear him moving around, keys jingling. "The big can opener is on the rescue truck. I'll have to borrow it. Don't do anything stupid until I get there. This is going to be epic." The line went dead. Gus looked at me, a question in his eyes. "Reinforcements are on the way," I said. 15 minutes later, a vehicle appeared at the end of the street. It wasn't a fire engine, but a bright red fire department-issued pickup truck, the kind the battalion chiefs drive. Tom's personal vehicle. He pulled up to the curb with a screech of tires that was definitely an HOA violation. He hopped out, wearing his station t-shirt and a grin that stretched from ear to ear. He looked like a kid on Christmas morning who had just been told he could open his presents with a sledgehammer. He marched to the back of the truck, flipped open a heavy-duty toolbox, and with a theatrical grunt, heaved a massive, greasy, bright orange hydraulic tool onto his shoulder. It was the jaws of life. It looked completely, gloriously out of place in the meadows at Whispering Pines. It was an instrument of raw, mechanical power, now resting on the manicured edge of my lawn, mere feet from Carol's prize-winning rose bushes next door. Curtains began to twitch in the houses around us. A neighbor walking his poodle froze mid-stride. Gus, the grizzled contractor who had seen it all, just stared. His mouth hung slightly open. A slow, beautiful smile spread across his weathered face, a look of pure, unadulterated reverence. "Well, I'll be a son of a bitch," he whispered. The stage was set. The audience was gathering. It was time for the show. Tom strode into my backyard like a conquering hero. He set the hydraulic spreader, its proper name, down on the grass, then went back for the pump, a small but powerful gasoline engine. "Right," he said, rubbing his hands together. "Where's the patient?" I pointed to the lock. Tom circled the shed, inspecting the lock from all angles like a bomb disposal expert. "Yep, she's a beaut, but nothing a little 10,000 psi of pressure can't solve." He positioned the tips of the spreader around the thick, hardened steel shackle of the padlock. He gave me and Gus a look. "Stand back, gentlemen, and you might want to cover your ears." He yelled, mostly for the benefit of the twitching curtains across the street. "Clear!" He pulled the starter cord on the pump. The small engine sputtered to life with a roar that shattered the suburban silence. Then came the high-pitched, escalating whine of the hydraulics. It was a sound of immense power being brought to bear on a very small, very specific problem. I watched, mesmerized. This was it. The climax? The orange metal jaws, a tool designed to rip the doors off mangled cars to save human lives, began to close. Slowly. Deliberately. The black padlock, Carol's symbol of ultimate authority, began to resist. For a second, nothing happened. Then, I saw it. The thick, half-inch shackle began to deform. It groaned, a low metallic shriek of protest. It was the sound of inflexible rules meeting an unstoppable force. The whine of the hydraulic pump intensified. Tom gritted his teeth, giving the controls another squeeze. The steel of the shackle turned a sickly, pale color as it stretched beyond its limits. Then, with a final, deafening, soul-satisfying snap, the lock didn't just break, it exploded. A chunk of the shackle shot across the yard and pinged off my neighbor's fence with the force of a bullet. The main body of the lock fell to the ground with a pathetic clatter. A cloud of metallic dust hung in the air. Silence. Tom cut the engine. The sudden quiet was more profound than the noise had been. He lowered the jaws of life. A wisp of smoke curled from its tips. I stepped forward, my heart pounding. I reached out and pulled the now useless hasp away from the door. With a slight creak, I opened my shed. The morning sun streamed in, catching the chrome of my new smoker. It shone like a holy beacon, a testament to freedom and the unreasonable application of force. I had won. I looked across the street, and there she was, Carol. Standing on her perfectly swept front porch, her cordless phone clutched to her ear, her other hand covering her mouth. Her face was a perfect mask of pure, unadulterated, slack-jawed horror. Checkmate. The arrival of the flashing red and blue lights was almost an anticlimax. 2 police cruisers rolled up to the curb, sirens off, but their presence screaming official business. Carol, having recovered from her shock, was now in full-blown victim mode, flagging them down like she was trying to land a 747. She was pointing a trembling finger at my backyard, her face a theatrical mask of outrage. A young, eager-looking cop with a fresh haircut, I'll call him Officer Miller, got out of the first car. From the second car, a much older, mustached sergeant with the weary eyes of a man who had seen every form of human stupidity imaginable, ambled out. This was Sergeant Kowalski. "Officers, thank God you're here," Carol cried, rushing towards them. He destroyed HOA property with that weapon." She gestured wildly at the jaws of life, which Tom was now casually leaning against. Kowalski's gaze drifted from Carol's frantic face to my backyard. He took in the scene. Me, standing by my open shed. Gus, a stoic statue of a contractor. Tom, grinning like the cat that ate the canary. And the magnificent orange tool resting on the grass. His eyes lingered on the jaws of life for a long moment, and I saw the corner of his mustache twitch. He walked over, his pace unhurried. "Afternoon, folks. Mind telling me what all the commotion is about?" Before I could speak, Carol launched into her tirade. "He is in flagrant violation of Bylaw 7.4a. I secured the unapproved material storage unit according to protocol, and he used that thing to destroy the lock. It's destruction of property, malicious vandalism." Kowalski listened patiently, nodding. When she finally wound down, he turned to me. "Sir, your side of the story?" I took a deep breath and kept it simple. "Officer, this is my house and my shed, on my property. This morning I found she had put her own lock on it, locking me out of my own building and preventing me from accessing my tools and materials. I have a contractor here," I gestured to Gus, "and a concrete truck that I'm paying for by the minute. I needed to get into my shed, so I removed her lock." Kowalski's eyes shifted to Tom. "And you are?" "Tom," he said, patting the jaws of life like it was a friendly dog. "Just helping a buddy move some heavy equipment." The mustache twitched again. This time it was unmistakable. He was fighting a smile. He turned back to Carol, his expression now one of professional boredom. "Ma'am, let me get this straight. This is his shed on his property, correct?" "Yes, but it was in violation," she insisted. "He destroyed the lock. The HOA owns that lock." "Ma'am," Kowalski said, his voice taking on the slow, deliberate cadence of someone explaining a very simple concept to a very small child. "You can't just go around locking up other people's buildings, no matter what your book of rules says. That's a civil matter, and a legally gray one at that. As for the lock, once you put your lock on his property without his consent, he has a right to remove it to access his own stuff. What he does to his own property and to the lock preventing him from accessing it, as long as he's not hurting anyone, well, that's his business." He paused for effect. "There's no crime here." Officer Miller looked utterly confused, as if his entire police academy training had failed to prepare him for the complexities of suburban warfare. Kowalski gave the younger cop a look that said, "We're leaving now. Have a nice day, folks," Kowalski said to our group. He tipped his hat to Carol. "Ma'am, I'd suggest you consult a lawyer before you go around locking up any more sheds." They got back in their cars and drove off. As the cruisers pulled away, I caught a glimpse of Sergeant Kowalski in his passenger seat. He was shaking with silent, unrestrained laughter. The victory was absolute. Gus let out a whoop and slapped me on the back so hard I nearly fell into a rose bush. "Kid, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Now let's go pour some damn concrete." The legend spread faster than a grass fire. By the time the concrete for the Metropolis Foundation was smooth and setting, every neighborhood text chain and Facebook group was buzzing. I was no longer Dave, the new guy from the city. I was the Jaws of Life guy. The next few weekends were a blur of joyous construction. Gus and I, fueled by beer and a shared sense of righteous victory, built the Metropolis. We used my beautiful, forbidden autumn russet bricks. We built the chimney a full 12 inches taller than the bylaws allowed. It was a masterpiece of defiance, and it was glorious. To celebrate its completion, I decided to make a statement. I threw a massive block party. I put flyers in every mailbox. I sent a special, handwritten invitation to Carol. I spent 2 days slow-smoking 4 massive beef briskets in my new smoker until they were melt-in-your-mouth tender. The smell of hickory smoke and roasting meat, the very smoke drift Carol had feared, wafted through the meadows at Whispering Pines like a declaration of independence. And they came. Everyone came. They came for the free food, but they stayed for the story. One by one, neighbors I'd only ever nodded at before pulled me aside. "That was amazing," said a dad from down the street. "Carol once fined me because my kid's basketball hoop was an unapproved shade of orange." "She made us dig up our entire vegetable garden," a woman confided, "because it wasn't an approved form of ground cover." Emboldened by my stand, they had found their courage. The whispers of revolution had become a roar. At the next monthly HOA meeting, held this time in a rented community room because Carol's garage was no longer big enough to hold the insurgency, the inevitable happened. A motion was made from the floor to hold a new election for president. It passed with a thunderous aye. Carol was voted out in a landslide. A reasonable, friendly dad named Mike, whose only platform was, "Let's just be normal to each other," was voted in. His first act as president was to table a motion to completely overhaul the architectural review process, reducing it to a single page of common sense guidelines. Months later, on a cool autumn evening, I was standing at my finished Metropolis, flipping burgers on the grill. The brick was warm, the stone base was solid, and the smell was heavenly. Sarah was beside me, potting some flowers. Tom was there, sipping a beer and admiring our handiwork. Sitting on a special shelf I had built into the brickwork, like a sacred relic, was the mangled, twisted, destroyed corpse of the Abloy Protec 2 padlock. My trophy. I saw a figure walking down the sidewalk. It was Carol, holding the leash of her tiny, trembling dog. She kept her head down until she was directly in front of my house. Then, she stopped and looked up. She looked at me. She looked at the meatropolis, standing proud and defiant in my backyard. She didn't smile, she didn't scowl. She just gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something far more valuable. It was respect. The kind of respect you can only earn with a laminated notice, a gluten-free scone, and 10,000 pounds of hydraulic pressure. I nodded back, then turned and flipped a burger. The suburbs were supposed to be quiet. I'd just had to get loud to make them peaceful.